Hey, good evening, everybody. Um, Doing a lot more streams this week because of all the stuff that's cooking. I just want to let everybody know we're going to have our normal show on Saturday with Ahmed Cabello and the crew, and then a Think Tank Sunday episode for all the patrons. Welcome. If you're just joining in, smash the like button if you haven't yet. Hit subscribe and hit the bell so you get the notifications. What's up? And of course, go to patreon.com/TMBS to become a patron. Hello. And TMBS.FM to buy merch, to buy gear, and to get tickets to our upcoming Michael Brooks live shows in Austin in April and Boston in June. Become a patron, patreon.com/TMBS. And during this whole chat, if you can, hit us with as many super chats as possible. That's crucial. It's how the whole thing keeps growing. We had a very big growth month last month. And I'll definitely try to get to some questions tonight. Uh, yeah, I mean, obviously, I was watching some of the Elizabeth Warren, Rachel Maddow interview. There's a kind of neurotic tendency to just be like, oh, well, now, don't talk about that anymore. It's time to talk about Biden. And it's true. It is time to talk about Biden. I think I'll get to Biden in a minute, actually. Thank you. I'll get to Biden in a minute. Biden is very, very difficult for our part of the media ecosystem to deal with. And this is getting to bigger questions that we have to think about and strategize around. But I will say, I mean, obviously, what I saw of the Maddow interview, look, it's just a selfish tantrum that Warren is on, and I, you know, look, I will admit and own that my anger and irritation comes from several places, and I think the only stuff is it possible to win with Bernie's constituency going forward. I'm worried how we get the suburban vote going forward. Well, yeah, I think that that's very difficult. Can't give much more than today because I donated 50 to Bernie yesterday. Hope you understand. Of course, please. Thanks a million and awesome. I think that's a very serious challenge. Um, I think that there's more hope in the long term and even in the short term. It's a very, very difficult path of actually politically activating working people. Because ultimately, this is a class politics. And ultimately, not all, there's obviously plenty of people, thank you, in the professional managerial class. There's plenty of people in the suburbs. There's plenty of people who are, Bernie impression of him sending Trump and Bloomberg to the same gulag cell. I think you guys will enjoy your time together. I give you more, but I gave Bern 100 this week. Thank you so much. And absolutely. Um, I was pretty early on Warren too. I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, with all the obvious exceptions and plenty members of the upper class and the suburban class who have great politics and are cool people, there is a structural interest. And it's a class conflict. There's wealth and not wealth. There's, broad overriding interests for working and poor people, which is my core concern. And there's folks in the upper middle class who are much more concerned about a variety of other kind of areas of using politics as a vehicle of emotional expression. And I think that's a different thing. Warren supporters are super easy to flip right now, show empathy and understanding them. And generally, the actual regular people are better like are butter like flip to Bernie. I flipped several. Guys, I'll keep saying this. When you're interacting with regular people, if you're going door to door, if you're out campaigning, if you're talking to coworkers, friends, family, have debates, be spirited. In general, people should be much more comfortable with disagreement, critique, and even some polemic. It's not the end of the world. People can relax a bit. But of course, the orientation towards everybody, Trump voters, Buttigieg voters, Warren voters, whatever, to the extent that it's possible, of course, Be polite, be engaged. You think there wasn't enough ground game in the suburbs? I think ground game is the problem in the suburbs. I think we're really starting to get to the point where Bernie has an amazing ground game. The problem now is earned media, advertising strategy, a broader set of messaging, and dealing with the fact that the entire upper class strata is violently opposed to him. We shouldn't try to flip. No, I don't agree with that. Of course, we have to try to persuade voters. But Warren herself and what she's indulging and what she's doing on television, and I'll just own that basically, I'll get back to that question in a minute. I'll hopefully get time. I just have to own that at the that I have some, you know, I've said plenty of times I have a lot of closeness personally to issues like poverty, like uh, deprivation. And even right now, I have somebody very close to me in my life who's going through a very serious housing crisis, and blessedly, we're in a position to actually help. And I think that, yes, James, I think that's smart. I will admit that part of the anger and frustration that I have around Warren and not normal people that supported her, but all of the, some of the kind of really just, mega stupid narcissistic takes that you see in media, and from her herself. I mean, she's on Rachel Maddow in this historical moment complaining about Twitter. It's embarrassing, it's bizarre, it's awe-inspiring, it's kind of stunningly narcissistic. I have this personal dimension where I cannot believe how serious the stakes are for real material things. And I find that level of indulgence to be actually like personally offensive. Secondly, I think that, the Sanders campaign bought way too much into this kind of unity nonsense and didn't do clear differentiation in the beginning. That's just political campaigns. That's what you do. And third, I think this is really, really challenging because ultimately, there is this notion. I mean, look, the socialist base of America, people on the actual, some type of populist progressive left, it's growing, there's momentum, but it's a minority. We're not a governing majority yet. And in fact, for all of the flack he gets and all of the kind of constant concern trolling about him, Bernie is in many respects more popular than the socialist politics, right? He's further ahead. Um, and so, of course, we're going to need to build out coalitions and we need to persuade and appeal to broader, different types of people. But I ultimately think that there is a, professional class PMC, self-identified liberal that discourses all these concerns about this, that, or whatever issue, and, cares deeply about, poverty and inequality and so on. That's not what's motivating them. It is a very, very narrow set of self-affirmation politics. And self-affirmation politics is stuff we all do on some level. There's nothing innately wrong with it, but it is extremely narrow and is extremely about personal fulfillment, and not collective endeavor. And so that's going to be like an actual structural conflict with how we actually build out. Um, Look, I hope the Warren endorsement isn't necessary. I've said from a very long time, guys, and I've taken a lot of flack. I don't think she's going to endorse Bernie Sanders. I don't think that's who she is. I don't think that's her politics. I don't think that's her commitment. I don't think that's how she calculates. And I also think, thank you so much, man. And I also think, frankly, that what it's actually surprised me, she's never been as to the left. She doesn't have this strong progressive spirit. She wasn't willing to take risks in 2016. There was no real reason why she ran this time. But I am actually surprised at really just like the level of narrow personal aggrievement coming out of that camp. So I think those are bigger problems. There's something in this and how narcissistic and toxic it is that speaks to bigger challenges about how to actually build a coalition, how to actually speak to a large group of people, and not engage with you know somehow navigate. I really don't. I do not know the answer. I don't know the answer, um, but I do know that it's a real challenge. Um, what else was I going to say? I think the real problem with, and also of course turning out young voters is a major problem. But I think the catch 22 is that in order to bust through certain people's deep cynicism, we actually have to deliver some things for them. And of course, you can't deliver things for them without having someone like Sanders being president, and a much broader, Stephen Austin, serious movement. Um, but look, again, can't be stressed enough. The most important thing is whatever chance remains of Bernie getting elected president. And there is a chance. We're going into Michigan. Again, it's baked into the cake. The establishment is against Bernie. It would be great if Warren came through. I doubt it. I don't see it happening. But I do think that the campaign really needs to sharpen its message in the sense of it needs to be much more normie. It needs to have much more palatable sort of content putting out. They need to have a serious ad campaign strategy that somehow speaks to these suburban voters that are obsessed with normalizing. And I think and Bernie needs to somehow sell that message of basically like, look, yes, I am the candidate of dealing with fundamental long-term problems. That's true. But we also can't get back to normal if we don't deal with those underlying crises and problems. And third, and this is much more subtle, but the Democratic establishment, their number one priority is destroy Bernie. And in fact, for a lot of these people, it's great. Trump gets reelected. They can fundraise off of it. They can kibitz and catastrophize on television and get tax cuts from him. They don't care. They don't have children. They don't have people in their family in cages. They don't have people dying without health care. They don't have any of these problems. They live in affluent cities by and large that are guarded by racist paramilitary police forces, and they make nice livings talking to small groups of people and hyperventilating and moralizing all day. They don't give a fuck. They're infinitely more worried about, Bernie Sanders coming along and disrupting their consulting contracts and fundraising. Again, actual class conflict here. It's real. But I think beyond that, normal day in and day out Democratic voters across the ideological spectrum are absolutely appalled and disgusted by the racism, sexism, xenophobia, and barbarism of Donald Trump. They want to beat him. And the fundamental task, in a way, is yes, it's to attack Biden, but this is again where it's difficult. There's a huge amount of valid things to attack Biden on. Biden is a man, as a career. Read Branko Mercicic's book on him. Thank you. He's a disaster on every major policy area. I think some of those things could have more resonance. I think, yes, if you talk about Joe Biden's bankruptcy bill, that is a big thing. I think if you talk about how his support of NAFTA alone cost 1 million jobs in Michigan, people should be drilling that, drilling that, drilling that, drilling that. But ultimately, and it's subtle, but like, look, people really care about beating Donald Trump, and the Democratic establishment is trying to push forward maybe a beloved figure for many people, but someone who clearly is not physically and mentally well enough to do this. And if you watch clips of Joe Biden in 2016 versus Joe Biden in 2019 versus Joe Biden in 2020, you are seeing, genuinely actually a very sad and unpleasant to watch, but deep, radical decline. Somehow that needs to come across. That's real. This guy does not have the capacity to do this. And we are in an emergency situation with getting rid of an extraordinarily dangerous, grotesque administration. So I think that somehow those three beats need to be hit. As far as policy goes, we got to focus on cutting Social Security, cutting Medicare, which Joe Biden has advocated for decades. More viscerally, maybe because it actually happened, is if if you've been through some type of bankruptcy, if you've been wiped out by medical debt, Joe Biden, as the senator from MBNA, helped make that happen. He fought for it. He fought. He spent hours on the Senate floor and on television working to make it easier for your credit card, your bank, to immiserate you if your family fell into misfortune. And then, of course, he didn't meet a single trade bill, which has devastated America's working class. That we don't, that that he didn't like. We will not go quietly. If the establishment wants to fight, we'll give them war. We will win solidarity. Yes, that's the attitude. So again, it would be great if Warren did it. I doubt she will. I don't think that's who she is. I don't think that's what it's about. But really, regardless, it's not about these deus ex machina. It's about our work, it's about our focus, and it's about our building out that solidarity. Right now, obviously, the number one task is to put pedal to the metal and fight and win Michigan. There's nothing in the world more important than that. But beyond that, these are the roots, these are the branches. Maybe we are in a historical moment. Maybe we are in a historical moment where this is 1910. This is years before changes take place. And that's a terrible thing because it means way more human suffering than is preventable. Every year we don't have single payer health care. Capitalism is murdering people. Cigna and Aetna are murdering people. The Joe Bidens of the world are aiding and abetting the murdering of people. But I know this work that we're doing, and again, as I say, this show is going to get even more focused on finally building some type of spirit, sort of strategic, thoughtful left that we desperately need. Desperately. And at the same time, thank you, I know that we are building the foundations now and the relationships that are coming together through the Sanders campaign, through the, yes, I agree. That's what I was just saying. Through the Sanders campaign, through wildcat strikes, through activism on every major issue across the country, and through shows and programs and independent media like this, that we are starting to build that foundation. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, we will keep going regardless, and we will never stop until, we stop. And there's always hope as long as we are alive, right? As Lula quoted. And of course, Lula is now out of jail after he was politically imprisoned. But he said, to paraphrase, the rich can and the powerful can take, only so many roses. I'm really butchering it. But they cannot stop the coming of spring. And that's our fight. That's our politics in search of spring. So we're going to do everything we can, and Bernie can still absolutely win and become president. And we need to be absolutely ruthless on Biden. We need to be ruthless on this grotesque establishment. The arc of President Obama coming to power on the surge of so much optimism, and then going and letting young people's life prospects decline for years and years. $5 trillion of housing wealth destroyed by Wall Street. The Obama administration recapitalized Wall Street with zero consequences while expanding a global empire and letting, literally in this country over the last several years, life expectancy is declining. We are in the brute phase under Democrats and Republicans of grotesque, immoral, inhumane neoliberal economics. And the only person with any type of serious response to that and the consistency and integrity around it is Bernie Sanders. And at the same time, we know that there's a lot of other, that a lot is emerging. And that's the paradox we have to work with. There's nothing more important than the Sanders campaign. It could still win. I wish everybody had taken it profoundly seriously out of the gate. Hopefully everybody's taking it profoundly seriously now. And we're also building relationships. We're building new things. And we know what will emerge from that. We don't know what will emerge from that. We do know we will work, we will fight, we will build, and this show will help build out that strategic left. Folks, become a patron. We need to get to that 6,000 patron mark. That's the kind of baseline goal as we move out, build out our own thing, get our own studio, and so on. I really appreciate all of you immensely. Go to patreon.com/TMBS. If you haven't yet, click subscribe, click the like button. Follow us all over social media. You guys are all the best. Appreciate all. Nina Turner is awesome. We love Nina Turner. Appreciate all of you.